We left off in chapter 6, and the author of Hebrews is setting something up, and we're actually finally getting into the meat and potatoes, the real food, the real substance of Hebrews, okay, when we get to chapter 7. And what struck me as I began to study and prepare for this is the fact that the author of Hebrews was very, very well educated and had a Greek education, because whenever you start to look at what he sets up in chapter 7, you see a person that is used to debate and argument. Okay? They've been brought up in a educational system where debate and argument is everything. Let me give you an example. We understand that everything is made up of atoms, right? All matter is made up of atoms. But this debate goes all the way back to the Greeks. The Greeks were trying to decide what is everything made of. And you had two different philosophies. You had Socrates, who believed that, like most people at that time, believed that it was made up of 4 elements. Earth, water, wind, and fire. 4 simple elements, okay? Because those were all things that we could see, and that's the way he debated. It's like, okay, you can see this. Now, Democritus comes along, he says, no, everything is made up of these things. He called atmos, what we today call atoms. But in the debate, he's talking about something so small that we still have trouble seeing today. It takes an electron microscope to actually see what an atom looks like. But they actually debated this. And it was a big deal in Greek society as to what is everything made up of. Now, Socrates won because you could see it, you could feel it, you could touch it, you can touch earth, you can feel wind, you can feel the heat from a fire, and you can see the light from it. Okay? You can feel the wetness of water. All those things are tactile. Now, the author here, he ends chapter 6 with this statement, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us, having become a high priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Not an awful lot's known about this guy. Really not. We have basically 2 references in the Old Testament. One is dealing with Abraham, and the other is David in Psalms. And we just don't know a whole lot about him. But the author is setting up something here that is so important, because we got to remember that the Jews that this letter is written to, they're starting to fall away. They're wanting to go back to Judaism. They're wanting to go back to the law. So the author is setting up something here to show that the law is not everything. The Judaism is not everything. That there's a better way. And it's much simpler than what we see here in Judaism. So that's why I call this the superiority of Christ's priesthood a logical argument. So let's take a look at what the argument is. Okay? In chapter 7, we see that Jesus is the better high priest. We're going to see in chapter 8 that Jesus is a better covenant. We're going to see in chapter 9 that Jesus is a better sanctuary. And then in chapter 10, we're going to see that Jesus was a better sacrifice. So we're going to really try to dig through this and see what happens whenever we look at this guy named Melchizedek. So, if we go to Genesis, I'm going to read this for you. You don't have to go there. Hold your spot in Hebrews. Let's take a look at what happens. Should have had that bookmarked. I'm going to pick this up in verse 17 of chapter 14 in Genesis. Abraham has gone to war, okay? And he's just won and he's returning from battle. And it says that here in chapter 14, verse 17, beginning in 17, it says, and then after his return from the defeat of, now I'm going to destroy this name, Chaldamore, and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom, went out to meet him at the valley of Shiva, that is the king's valley. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. Now he was the priest of the Most High God. He blessed him. Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him a tenth of all. Okay, I want to stop right there. What do you notice in this story about Abram? This is before he becomes Abraham. Okay, what do you notice? How does he react whenever he meets this Melchizedek? It's a little different, isn't it? Normally what happens whenever you receive a blessing? How does the order work? Does it work from the top down or bottom up? It works from the top down, doesn't it? Normally that's the way it works. I mean, that's kind of the way we think of a blessing, especially in this situation. Notice that it also says that he's a king, okay? But yet he's a high priest. Now, I found this really interesting. Were there any high priests before him? Were they mentioned anywhere else in Genesis before we get to Melchizedek? He's not mentioned. They're not mentioned. He's the first. Is he a child of Abram or Abraham? No. He's not Levitical. He's not of Levi, who is the tribe of the priests. We don't know a whole lot about him. And that's where Hebrews picks it up. And that's where we're going to start here in verses 7, 1 through 3. It says, for this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham as he was returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham apportioned a tenth part of all the spoils, was first of all, by the translation of his name, King of Righteousness, and then also King of Salem, which is King of Peace, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, he remains a priest perpetually. So, there's some significant things about Melchizedek that we need to take a look at. He's a king priest, number one. Number two, he's a blesser. Number three, he received a tithe. Number four, he has a very significant name. A very significant name. So let's take a look at this. The writer referred to Melchizedek as the king and priest. Now, this was not uncommon at this time because a lot of kings were also high priests in the religion, especially during this time. It was not uncommon. It wasn't something new, okay? But he claims to be the high priest of the Most High God. We're talking about El Elyon. We're talking about the Most High God. This is something that hasn't happened before this incident. He's king in Salem, which is, they predict and think is Jerusalem. Okay? So he's the king of Jerusalem, and he is the most high priest of the Most High God. Wow. The first one. Not the Levitical priest, but the priest of the Most High God. He also receives a tenth. What does that mean? He receives a tenth, a tithe of the spoils of war. Now, an argument can be made that the Jewish people did not tithe from spoils. Okay? Whatever the spoils were, that was yours. The tenth came from your possessions. So whenever Abram gives a tenth to Melchizedek, okay, an argument can be made that they're breaking tradition. But if we really look at it, this is the tradition. This is where it starts. It was before Israelis, the Jews, were a people. Abraham set this up. He says, okay, you deserve a tenth. Now, according to Mosaic tradition and Mosaic law, how do the Levites survive? They don't work. Exactly, the tithe. That's the way they worked. That's the way they survived, literally. Because they did not work for a living. They were priests. So they received money from a tenth, a tithe, from all the other tribes of Israel, and that's the way they functioned. Now, here's this Most High priest of the Most High God receiving a tenth from a guy that he doesn't even really know. Comes out, gets him a blessing, he receives a tenth of everything that Abraham and his men have just taken. It's kind of unusual situation. But in reality, what's it setting up? It's setting up how we should respond whenever we give our lives to Jesus Christ. A tenth. Is that all God's really asking for? Of our worldly possessions? Yes, that's all he's asking for. And this can be a really touchy subject because we're talking about people's money, we're talking about people's wallets, and they don't like to hear that. But that's all God's asking for. No, it's not. That's the thing. It's not even ours. It's God's to begin with, and we're just giving back to God. But we like to hold on to it as tight as we possibly can. So, we've got a new situation going on here where things are really happening and changing, and we're getting a logical argument here. If we look at what this is written before even the Mosaic laws came down. This happened before the Mosaic law came down. This is before Aaron became the high priest, the holy priest of Levites. And this man had nothing to do with Levites. I want you to think about that for just a second. But yet, in verse 20 in chapter 6, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us, having become a high priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Why didn't it say Levi? Why didn't it say Aaron? Why does it say Melchizedek? We'll get into that. The writer continues in verse 4. It says in verse 4, it says, now observe how great this man was to whom Abraham, the patriarch, gave a tenth of the choicest spoils. Why do you think the author used the term patriarch here? I mean, what does patriarch mean?
Head of the household.
Head of the household. He's the chief guy. He's the number one, right? But yet, what does Abraham do? He gives a tenth to Melchizedek. Do you notice something here? We're starting to see something, right? In verses 5, it goes on and says, and those indeed of the sons of Levi who receive the priest's office have a command in the law to collect a tenth from the people, that is, from their brethren, although they are descendants from Abraham. But the one whose genealogy is not traced from them collected a tenth from Abraham, and blessed the one who had the promise. Melchizedek's not of this royal priesthood of Aaron's lineage. The Levites. Has nothing to do with him. Yet Jesus is compared to him. In verses 6 and 7, he says, but the one whose genealogy is not traced from them collected a tenth from Abraham and blessed the one who had the promise, but without any dispute, the lesser is blessed by the greater. The lesser is blessed by the greater. The lesser is blessed by the greater. Think about that for a second. The lesser is blessed by the greater. In verse 8 it goes on, it says, in this case, mortal man receives tithes, but in that case, one receives them of whom it is witnessed and that lives on. Lives on. Like I said, we don't know a whole lot about Melchizedek. We know absolutely nothing about his parents. As far as we know, he may still be alive. Because Moses does not record his birth, his genealogy, nor his death. Now, a lot of people have confused him and said, oh, he might have been an angel, or he might have been the forerunner of Jesus Christ himself. I think he was just a man. I think he was a man sent by God to show what is to come. Because there's going to be something better. Because that's what really the author of Hebrews is getting down to. Because he goes on and he says, and so to speak, through the Abraham, even Levi, who received tithe, paid tithe. For he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. So basically the author is making the argument here, a logical argument, that even though the priestly order of the Hebrew people has not even been established, Levi's not even born yet, he took part in the tithe that his father gave to Melchizedek. He's saying, hey, he was here, even though he's not. He's here in spirit and saying that he took part in the tithe. So who is he saying is better? The priesthood of Aaron or the priesthood of Melchizedek? Which one is greater? Because he's setting this up to say which is greater, the law or the new covenant that we have through Jesus Christ. That's where we're going with all this. That's what he's trying to set up here. He's trying to set up this logical argument, and he's saying, hey, there's a better way. There's an easier way. Don't fall away. Keep studying, keep reading, keep trying to understand the heart and mind of Jesus Christ, because that's what it's all about. If you can do that, you're not going to fall away. And that's what he's warning the Hebrew people here. He's saying, hey, there's a better way. Now, if we look at it, there's kind of two different scriptures here that deal with Melchizedek. One of them deals with Melchizedek as Abraham meets him. The other is with David in Psalms 110. And this is just cool. In the 110th Psalm, David records for us there we go. Where is it? I think so. Let me look again. I got ahead of myself. Thought I had that written down. Yeah. Didn't go back far enough. Was it 110? I thought it was 1. Yeah. Verse 4. Okay. Yeah. The Lord makes this promise on oath and will not revoke it. You are an eternal priest after the pattern of Melchizedek. Who's claiming this? This is in the Psalms. Who's claiming this?
The Lord says to my Lord, so it's got promises.
And David's writing this out, right? And was he Levi? Was he of the tribe of Levi? No. He was the tribe of Judah. Were they a royal priesthood? No. In fact, they were warriors, is what they were. That's what they were. Wait a minute. What tribe is Jesus' linealogy linked to? Judah. We refer to him as the Lion of Judah. You mean Jesus is not a part of the royal priesthood? Is he not part of the tribe that is set up to be the priest? No, he's not. No, he's not. Whoa, wait a minute. So God's got something going on, and he's already figured this out back before, way back. He's already got this figured out. He already knows something is going on. He understands that we've already fallen, and we need a way out. So he's going to give us an opportunity, and he's going to give us the law. And that's what we get whenever we start looking at verses 11 through 28. Basically, what we've got going on here is a situation in which he starts to make his foundational argument that Jesus is better. Because everything else up to this is just kind of setting up this argument. In verse 11, so if perfection had in fact been possible through the Levitical priesthood, for that basis the people received the law. What further need would they have been for another priest to arise, said to be of the order of Melchizedek, and not in Aaron's order? So he asks the question, which one's better? The priesthood of Melchizedek or the priesthood of Aaron? Melchizedek. Because what's the problem with the law? I mean, it's perfect. The law is perfect, is it not? God's perfect law, that's what we refer to it as. It's perfect, right? That's the problem. It's perfect. We're not. If we were, none of the rest of after the law was written, if we could do that, none of the rest of the Bible wouldn't need to be written. It'd have been over. It'd have been done. we'd understood everything. And if we could follow it, Jesus wouldn't have had to sacrifice for us. Because that's what led to Jesus' sacrifice. We could not, no way could we ever fulfill the rules of the law. He goes on, for when the priesthood changes, a change in the law must come. A change in the law must come. How much have we seen our laws change here in the United States? Throughout history. Every year, something new, right? Every year, something changes. I mean, if you go back and look at some of the old laws, you'll scratch your head and wonder why did they have to write this? But it was a different time, a different situation, right? We're getting to the point where something new has come along. His name is Jesus Christ. We're going to have to change some things, is what the author's trying to say here. We're going to have to look at these things and say, hey, wait a minute. We're in a different world. We're in a different situation. Sorry. We're going to have to look at what's going on. This is where we really tie in Psalm 110, verse 4, is because now things are starting to change. David, whenever he wrote this psalm, he's saying, I'm not Levitical. I'm not of the tribe of Levi. I am the tribe of Judah, yet I'm taking on a priestly role. And I'm proud of it. Because I'm going to talk about God, I'm going to sing about God, of all the things that he's done for me and my people, and I'm going to rejoice. I'm going to have a good time whenever I do it. And that's pretty much what David did, right? In the good times and in the bad times. In the bad times, he fell on his face. In the good times, he was on that mountaintop. But David wasn't even good enough. The friend of God, he wasn't good enough. We needed something better. So whenever we get to, sorry, I'm reading from a couple of different translations here. Into 13 and 14. For when the priesthood changes, a change in the law, this is verse 12, and a law must come as well. Yet the one thing these things are spoken about belongs to a different tribe, and no one from that tribe has ever officiated over the altar. For it is clear that our Lord is descended from Judah, yet Moses said nothing about the priests in connection with that tribe. Even Moses didn't say anything about the tribe of Judah having anything to do with the priesthood. That was all Levi. And this is even clearer if another priest arises in the likeness of Melchizedek, who has become a priest not by legal regulation about physical descent, but by the power of an indestructible life. Wow. Now he's making the argument that Melchizedek's life was indestructible, his priesthood was indestructible, but yet in 620, what did he do? He said that Jesus was of the order or the priesthood of Melchizedek. See what he's setting up here? Can you see it? Jesus is of the order of Melchizedek, a better priesthood than the Levitical priesthood. He goes on. Who has become a priest not by legal regulations about physical death, but by the power of an indestructible life. For here is the testimony about him. You are a priest in the order of, or a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. That's what David said, right? On the one hand, a former command is set aside because it is weak and useless. For the law made nothing perfect. Notice that. For the law made nothing perfect. On the other hand, a better hope is introduced through which we draw near to God. What did the author just say here? Law didn't make anything perfect, did it? But there is something that can. And it was a sacrifice. And since this was not done without a sworn affirmation from the others who have become priests, but without a sworn affirmation, but Jesus did so with a sworn affirmation by the one who said to him, "The Lord has sworn, and all will not change his." Pardon me, I can't read today. The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. I think sometimes we've confused our thinking whenever we look at a priest. I've always grown up looking at a priest as a Catholic priest, right? I mean, it's just how things were done. I mean, I look at the Catholic Church, they're pastors, they're preachers, they're whatever they're called priests, right? This is something entirely different, folks. This is something totally different than what we think of whenever we look at priests. Okay? In this case, we're talking about the Most High Priest, Jesus Christ. That means he's above and beyond anything we can imagine whenever it comes to absolute control of his church. Because he is in absolute control. And the author is trying to set up here so that the people who are thinking about stepping away from Jesus Christ realize that you've got the greatest thing that you're ever going to have in the palm of your hands. And that's the love of Jesus Christ. Why would you want to give that up? I've got a question for you. What's going on in our society today? Are churches full? Are they overflowing? Are people coming in the name of the Lord? They're walking away. They found an easier way. This means more right now than it ever has before. Because Jesus is saying, hey, I've got a better way. I've got something for you. But you got to believe. And you, as my body of believers, need to get out there and realize that, hey, there's people that are hurting, that are lost, that are searching, that are looking for something to fill the void in their heart. And the only way that they can fill that void is through the love of Jesus Christ. Why would you want to give that up? That's what the author's all about here. He's warning people. He's like, don't walk away. There's a better way. And he makes a logical argument, even though it can be kind of convoluted and you got to swim through the reeds and everything to finally get there. He's making a logical argument that there's a better way. I want to try to finish this up. In verse 22, accordingly, Jesus has become the guarantee of a better covenant. Remember, I said that we're going to talk about that. A better covenant. There's number one. And the others who became priests were numerous, because death prevented them from continuing in office. Death touched Jesus, but what happened? He got up, right? He got up. It touched him, but it didn't last. All those other Levitical priests, when they died, they were dead. That's it. That was it. But he holds his priesthood permanently since he lives forever. That makes sense, right? Anybody got an argument against that? I don't see how you can. The evidence is quite clear. Jesus got up and he rules. So he was able to save completely those who come to God through him because he always lives to intercede for them. I want you to think about that verse right there. If there's a memory verse out of this chapter, I think that's it, isn't it? He intercedes for us. What does that mean? He gets in the way. He gets in the way. He intercedes for us. Our inner heart, we know when things are wrong, right? Everybody here has a conscience. Everybody knows when, better not do that. Why is that? I honestly believe Jesus is interceding. He's saying, hey, stupid, wake up. You don't need to be doing that. Okay? I honestly believe he intercedes in our lives. I honestly believe that he is saying, puts his hands on us and say, stop, think about this for a second. Now, I'm hard-headed. My wife will tell you I'm hard-headed. And I will do my own thing, even despite what Jesus is telling me not to do. How smart is that? But thank God that he loves me enough to forgive me for my stupidity. Okay? He goes on. For it is indeed fitting for us to have such a high priest, holy, innocent, undefiled, separate from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. Exalted above the what? Heaven or heavens? Heavens, plural. I wonder what that means. He has no need to do every day what those priests do, to offer sacrifices first for their own sins and then for the sins of the people, since he did this in offering himself once and for all. The perfect sinless gift. Jesus was sinless whenever he went to the cross. He was the living sacrifice for our sins. No longer does a priest have to offer sacrifices for their own sins because Jesus is taking care of that. Once and for all. We're free because of Jesus' blood and sacrifice. Again, we go back to Psalm 110, verse 4. An order of Melchizedek forever. For the law appoints as a high priest men subject to weakness. But the word of solemn affirmation that came from the law appoints a son made perfect forever. The Son of Man, the Son of God. Became more than anything that Aaron could have ever imagined. the originator of the Levitical priesthood. Jesus became more than anything he could have ever imagined. But you know what? God already had a plan long before the law was even written. Because whenever Abraham came along, this is long before Moses was ever born. And I hate to say it, but they didn't know they needed saving yet. It wasn't until really Abraham that they started to figure these things out. And the thing of it is that the law saves no one. It's absolutely perfect. There's no way around it. It's really great at convicting us, but it's not great at redeeming us. It took something else to redeem us. It took the blood. It took the stripes. It took the death of our Lord and Savior to wash us clean. The great thing is, he loves us that much. And the author here is trying to say, why would you want to give that up? Why would you ever want to let go of the love that you have from Jesus Christ? Why would you want to walk away from that? Why would you want to go back to the law which only condemns you to death when Jesus extols you to life? It's logic. Don't walk away. You're going to be tempted. You're going to be led to try to walk away. You're going to be told things that are going to make you question your beliefs. You're going to be challenged. But we have something greater than any of that, and that's the love of Jesus Christ. He became our priest. Let's follow him. He became the head. Let's follow him. We'll find out that he's a better sacrifice, that he's a better sanctuary. All those things are to come. But today, he's a better priest. He's in charge. Let's let him be in charge. Exactly. He is the most high priest. It's kind of like Ohio State University. The Ohio State University. They actually copyrighted the. I'm not kidding. They actually copyrighted the. Well, we can say that about Jesus. He copyrighted it. He is the most high priest. End. Period. Nothing comes after him. Any questions, concerns?
Yeah, I was just thinking when you're talking about him being interceding, he doesn't just try to keep us to stop doing something. When we act on it, we're stupid. He goes to God and says, "Have mercy on my children." God is God, and you know how hard it is on the He actively goes to God and pleads.
Yeah, he pleads our case. And he's got to do that an awful lot with me. He does. And I'm sure each one of us can say the exact same thing. Jesus is going to do an awful lot for us if we'll let him. And I think that's one thing that the author is trying to get across here. Guys, this is so much better. This is so much better. And you got to understand this Christology that we're talking about here. The greatness of Christ is way better than anything the law could ever provide for you. Why would you want to go back to that? Why would you want to fall under its control again? You don't. Jesus is that much better. He loves us that much. He's concerned for us that much. It's amazing. It's amazing. I'm praying we'll get us out of here.